This is Roberto Perroni.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
It's always a great sign when the panel come in, they're chatty, they're friendly, and they haven't already had a punch-up in the waiting, which sometimes has happened before. The politics programme, not this one. But let's welcome to tonight's panel. We welcome back Independent Wealth Manager Jonathan Davis from Hertfordshire. Jonathan, good to see you again. We welcome Alistair Melville, owner and managing director of Hawke and Chadwick Limited.
Hello, thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
And completing our lovely panel tonight, one of Bedford and Bedfordshire's brightest businesswoman, Karen Frigg, the lady in white from the BBC's Question Time programme. I will, of course, will never forget. You were there. You were the one that
I was there.
and said, and I was watching in HD.
I know.
You
videoed it too, didn't you?
Why wouldn't I? Tonight's panel are Jonathan, Alistair and Karen. You can text the programme 81333. Start your text 3CR. Can we go back to a story we were looking at earlier on this afternoon? Does it matter how much your boss might earn? Ministers have published details of their plans for chief executive pay. In future, companies listed on the London Stock Exchange will have to publish their boss's salary and the average wage paid to employees, and then they have to justify the difference. The TUC thinks the government's bottled it, describing the proposals as feeble. Do we need to, if you work for a big, large organisation listed on the stock exchange, Karen, if I may start with you, do we need to know how much that top boss is earning, the fat cat pay?
I think we do, yes. Yeah, I think we do, because we know that over the years, the differential between what people at the top earn and everybody else earns is growing, and there needs to be some clarity on that, as indeed does there need to be clarity between the difference in what men and women who do the same job get paid.
In private companies?
In all companies. In all companies. If you're a man and you do a job and a woman sitting next to you doing the same job, you should be paid the same amount of money.
I am not going to argue with you on that.
No, that's just very wise.
No, we've had the recent episode of the BBC who couldn't get to a brewery and get themselves drunk, where they managed to mismanage their gender pay. They've had a year and a half to get ready, and they just got it all wrong, for surprisingly. But when it comes to the top, people have cited this after in the case of Martin Sorrell, WPP, global advertising agency. Last year, I think he made £48 million. What's wrong with that? He employs a lot of people. He makes sure it's a very successful company.
Yeah, that's fine. But then if he is so successful and his company is so successful, then what is the problem about, having his pay known? What's the issue?
Jonathan Davis.
We do know the pay of chief executives of public companies, so I'm not quite sure what the issue there is. Theresa May saying that CEOs are being paid too much. It's the, quote, unacceptable face of capitalism, unquote. The last time that phrase was used was back in the 1970s, you might recall, when Ted Heath talked about mining companies in certain countries in Africa, and that I could relate to. But to say that it's unacceptable that CEOs of hugely successful companies who employ hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of people locally and globally, to say that's unacceptable is absolutely outrageous, and it shows that Theresa May is not a free marketer, but in fact merely a populist, and that is exactly what we don't need in this country. We shouldn't care what CEOs are paid. What we should care about, though, one point, is if the companies fail, then don't bail them out. That's where the problem is.
Okay, I'm not sure if Theresa May has asked her husband Philip, but he claims he takes the bins out. I mean, she earns £143,000 a year as Prime Minister, Alistair. He, of course, he's a senior executive for an investment fund called Capital Group that controls £1.4 trillion in assets. I mean, I'd like to know what he earns, of course. I don't think she's thought this one through.
Yes, no, it's, I mean, my view on this is, I think, from a perspective, I'll go back to what I was going to say as you guys were talking. It reminded me of there was a TED Talk. Have you heard of TED Talks?
Yes.
It's sort of the ideas guys, and there was this chap, and I can't remember. I apologise because I can't remember exactly where he was from or what he was doing, but he had a company in South America, and he was talking about that he sort of brought in this complete transparency throughout the entire company to the point where even if you were sort of the cleaner or the janitor or something, you had an opportunity to sit on the board of directors and make decisions with the directors, and he had absolute transparency. What everyone earned was all out on the table, and he said it had some interesting results in terms of employee motivation. And I think this goes to the heart of what motivates people to work, what makes people happy, and then I think there's a sort of a little bit of a disconnect, certainly, that I've noticed throughout my career. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this who may be listening, or anyone else on the panel, but as I was coming up through my formative years, I felt that I was more engaged and motivated if I knew more of how I fit within the company. And I think as my company's expanding, I'm intending to, as I take people on, I want them to know the ins and outs of the finances. I think if you have this kind of them and us thing... Okay,
but it's your company.
Yes, it
right.
is. Yeah,
so the responsibility is your... With all due respect, you might employ people, they turn up, they might not turn up because they've had a weekend away, they've had a few drinks or whatever, but you have to turn up.
Absolutely.
You go home, the problems, the responsibilities are yours. Why shouldn't you get paid more and keep it to yourself?
Well, I think sharing that with my employees allows them to understand where they fit in the company. I don't see why it should bother me that they do know what I earn. If I earn significantly more than them and I have significantly more responsibility, then it's fair that they understand that. But that's a conversation that I should have with my employees, and I don't think running away from that is the answer. I think if you've got the responsibility for a company, you also have the responsibility to be honest with your employees and be transparent with them.
So, Jonathan, under this new scheme, for example, I don't know if BP still listed on the London Stock Exchange, the chairman of BP will have to justify his or her difference in salary between the average worker and what he or she might be earning. How do you justify getting paid, I don't know, millions and millions of pounds for running a huge international corporation where the pressure, the responsibilities are all yours?
Well, it's in a massive red herring as far as I'm concerned. It's the Tory party being taken over by the TUC and the GMB trades union. It's remarkable.
I'm quite sure that's true, but they might dispute that.
There's absolutely no way that we should care what the pay of senior executives is. What we should care about is the governance of the organisation, the share price, and whether or not they're making profits and cash flow. We don't care about the operations of the business. If we're investors, we care about the results. We don't care about what happens inside.
I'm always reminded of a friend of mine who runs a rather large organisation in Hertfordshire, and he's got on the payroll currently about 150 people, and his big concern is every start of every working week we have to make enough money to pay everyone's wages and make sure they pay their mortgages, and the pressure. I might drive the big flash car, but the pressure and the responsibility is all mine. I'm not sure what problem there is to trying to solve here, Karen, because surely this just fuels envy, jealousy.
No, I don't think so. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. There has been, I get what you're saying about it's being a populist view, and perhaps that's so, but that doesn't make it wrong. What it means is that in order for a society to function, there needs to be a sense in that society, whether it's in a company, whatever it might be, of fairness. And I think what this is trying to do is to show that, everybody has obviously a job, and the point of the matter is, if you're earning, whilst I understand that, yes, what you're saying, if your company is very successful and you're earning millions and millions, that's absolutely fine, that's great, good for you, well done. But if you're then paying employees less than the minimum wage, then that is a problem, and that is what I hope that this will actually show.
The shareholder, I said that I'm not going to name obviously, but there's a rather famous large coffee chain. Most of their staff are on 0 hours contracts. The person who runs that chain makes a lot of money. If I was a shareholder, bit of me saying, morally, I would pay them the full whack. But I'm thinking, as long as I get a return on my shares, what do I care?
But you see, that's it, isn't it? And that's the nub of it, because the scenario that you have just shown there is exactly what one would hope that this will show. Because it's all right for you to earn 40 million or whatever it is that you're earning, but then don't, treat your employees disrespectfully, and that unfortunately is what's happening.
Jonathan?
In the free market, if we had a free market, if staff were unhappy, they'd just up and leave. They'd go to another company.
Yes, but that's
They'd
not,
be
not if there aren't any
self-regulating.
jobs. That's all very well.
If there aren't
That's
any
the
jobs,
issue.
there's 500,000 or 600,000 jobs available in the country.
To do what?
Well, I don't know each one of them, but the records show there are 500,000 or 600,000 jobs
The
available.
argument might be, Jonathan, that the kind of jobs that are available, people can't leave their jobs because the kind of jobs that are available would be lower income. They would perhaps working, if they're working in an office, for example, or they've accrued a number of years' status, they might have to go and work in a warehouse, for example, a warehouse, and they wouldn't get the sort of income they need to support their family.
Well,
I was going to say, you were saying earlier that what is it? The average wage now needed
Well,
is
the
something like
average income.
income is how much now?
£22,000.
£22,000. So if you've got a family, you're the main breadwinner. You've got 2 children. You can't just walk out of a £40,000 a year job and go and work in one that pays £11,000. End of.
Well, clearly, if you did that, you'd be a bit of an idiot. What we're talking about here is, should there be transparency how much chief executives earn? Should they have to justify how much they earn in relation to the average income in the company? The shareholders, the remuneration committee, the people who own the company will determine whether or not it's appropriate. If it's inappropriate, those chief executives will get sacked. If they're not making profits, if they're not doing the job, if they're not making the company go forward and therefore employing even more people, then those chief executives will lose the job. The free market will always self-regulate.
We will take some trouble to come back with Jonathan, with Karen, and with Alistair. They came in happy, smiling, friendly. There might be a fight breaking out soon. Great panel tonight. Jonathan Davis, Alistair Melville, and Karen Frick. Alistair, you're the owner and managing director of Hawke and Chadwick. Just remind people what it is you do.
I am, yes. So I am an estate agent. Don't all run away at once. I sell and let houses. Basically, what it is.
Don't be embarrassed.
No. Well, it's just people don't tend to like estate agents.
Yeah, there's always been this estate agents. Oh, they're terrible.
Yeah, well, I'm nice though. Aren't I nice?
When my first job was an estate agent.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
You survived.
Yes, I'm still alive.
I've always said a good estate agent makes buying and selling a house a much easier proposition, and I guess renting too. It just, I'm sure there have been some bad apples, but I've always found them very helpful.
Yes,
How's the market? You're in Hertfordshire.
Yeah, Hertfordshire. So we cover Luton, Harpenden, St Albans, bit of Hemel, so that kind of area. That kind of we do a bit of
There are
Watford.
constant daily publications, surveys and reports. It's going up, it's going down, it's £10,000 increase, it's £10,000 loss. What is the current state of play in your part of the world?
The current state of play that I've noticed, and obviously I can only speak for myself, you get different reports from the portals and other agents, but I've noticed the market's pretty quiet this year. Reason, currently summer holidays. People are away. I've had stuff on the market that's just sat there and just been quiet, not a lot of calls on it. Reasonably priced. We always try and do a lot of research on price, try and get as much information as we can and triangulate it. And it's just been a bit of a funny market this year.
Are the buyers still there?
Yeah. I always there's a lot of estate agents that I've heard stories from vendors of mine who've come to me or have gone elsewhere or whatever, and you sort of talk to them and you sort of get the skinny on what's happened, and sometimes you hear these excuses of there's not the buyers or there's not the tenants, but I've always said that as long as there's someone who has a need to move, there will always be a buyer. All it is a question of price. If you priced it right, there'll be a buyer. That's all it comes down to. And
you will inevitably have been to some really nice houses.
Indeed.
Have you ever been to a house which was so rubbish? It was so bad. You're never going to rent this yourself.
My first ever deal was in Luton. It was a bedsit on a road called Ruthing Close, which is just off Farley Hill, for those who know it.
I know it.
And you know it. And it's a collection of blocks, and you wouldn't go there at night on your own, put it that way. And this chap, he was a friend of mine, he was a very good friend of mine, and he'd put it on the market. He'd started to do some building work in there, and he hadn't finished. And we went in there and we sold it, and it was £35,000. The chap that bought it couldn't get a mortgage, so he bought it with a unsecured loan. So, and he went in, he did it up, and he rented it, and I don't know what he's doing with it now, but that was possibly the worst.
Oh, wow.
This, in Train Spotting, they have the worst toilet in Scotland. That was the worst flat in Luton, I think, and it's my first ever deal, and I earned £350. That was the first one I ever sold under Hawke and Chadwick, and we've got. If you've seen our branding, it's quite upmarket. I was sitting there with my head in my hands, going, "What have I done? What have I started?"
We've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, indeed.
Jonathan, independent wealth manager. Just remind people what it is you do, the kind of work you do.
I help wealthy people get wealthier.
Can you help poor people like me get wealthier?
I can give general guidance, but no. Oh, like you? Yeah. Poor people like you, yeah. Right. I've seen BBC salaries.
Hang on. Not on the list. Hashtag not on the list.
Hashtag gutted. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't make the list? No, there's no chance of ever making the list. That's the thing. Karen, just describe to me what it is, how you earn your living.
I run a PR, events and social media management company.
What does that entail?
So we do PR for people, so they're public relations. We put on events for clients, and we also run social media management for our clients. Yeah.
Okay. Now, story which I know it would have been important to you. Story we've been covering this afternoon. It's I call it the demise of the Bedfordshire on Sunday through no fault of the Lord. It's a great local newspaper.
Absolutely.
Always has been. And the people who own the newspaper are going to change it to a midweek title, and they're going to close the website. Which I don't understand, because it's not as if... Oh, I know, you're what? I know. What? What they're saying is, we don't want it, we don't care. But it's a really popular newspaper still.
Yeah, I mean, I know you interviewed Steve Lowe earlier on today.
Yeah,
absolutely. Fantastic ex-editor of the Beds on Sunday, and obviously the current editor, Sarah. It's a fantastic local... newspaper, but what is important about local newspapers, and indeed local radio, is that what they do is they bring local stories to the forefront of people, and they hold local politicians, companies, whatever, to account. If you lose that, then you are losing almost a part of your democracy.
I can't understand the decision they've made, because I think the paper still... But the county of Bedford is a good town.
Yes.
A great, expanding town, vibrant
very
town.
much so.
There is still some very old money, good money in Bedford. Do you not think it's a possibility someone might think, hang on a minute, there's an opportunity, because they're out advertised. I know everyone's moving to digital.
It runs on advertising.
Facebook and Twitter. But do you not think that there's a potential for a business still?
Absolutely, but the problem is with any print media, is that, of course, you've got to pay for the print. You've got to pay to have it distributed, and therein is the cost. And in order to do that, you need the advertising income. And if that becomes difficult, then the whole thing becomes difficult. And I think, this doesn't just apply to the Beds on Sunday, this applies to any form of, publication.
No, absolutely. But in Bedford, are there not enough big businesses who could pledge take out a regular advert, full-page advert, and give the paper, a new paper, a Phoenix-like paper, a chance to shine?
You would hope so, but I suppose it's like with anything, you would have to have that person who is going to stand up and say, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to find that investment, and I'm going to find that advertising.
Jonathan, do you have any wealthy clients who might be interested in buying up a newspaper title in Bedford?
I have no clients who are interested in loss-making businesses.
Now, why do you describe it as a loss-making business? Why do you not think someone can turn this around and make money out of this?
It's not my field. I couldn't say why, but they're not taking this action because it's making money. I mean, it's very clear.
Yes, but all newspapers, is not just in Bedford, across the board, are struggling. They all are. That's not an unknown fact.
It's a different world. The world's moving on. We have an estate agent here who's unlikely to advertise in a local paper because it's all online now.
Yeah, you say that, but
when
I'm relaxing in one of the smallest rooms in the house, I do like to look at all the property pages in the local paper.
Is that the East Wing?
Yeah.
I mean, do you advertise in local papers?
We did. Well, we tried it. We didn't. When I first started, this is the interesting thing from the perspective of an estate agent. Now, my first job, I worked for a company called Premier Move, who you may remember, were in Harpenden. They were in St Albans. That was my first ever job, and I worked there as a lettings T-boy, and worked my way up. And when I first started, this was 2006, so not in the dark ages, but we advertised in the paper predominantly, and then this thing came along called Rightmove, and everyone went, "Oh, okay, we might as well have that, give that a go. That'll be a flash in the pan." And look now, You've got Rightmove, Zoopla on the market, everything, these huge online portals, and you've got these online estate agents, and the newspaper has disappeared and dwindled into a kind of almost the same comedy sideshow. So I've seen it completely turn on its head, and now when we go out to advertise, the biggest thing that people ask us is, where is my property going to be advertised? Obviously, because they want to know how many people are going to come through the door, how are we going to get them? And there's so much competition in our market. It's a saturated market. Everyone's got different methods of achieving the end goal. So we have to be very competitive with where we're putting things. And people never mention newspapers now. They go, is it going to go online? Which portal is it going to go on? Well, where are you going to list it? What are you going to do? How are you going to boost it?
Doesn't everyone like of an evening, sitting down with a glass of wine, or a glass of cognac in Jonathan's case, very good. He serves very good cognac, and just think, oh look, there's my next door neighbour's house. Look how much it's worth.
It does happen, I think, but from the perspective of a business owner, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I want to do deals. I want to take a house on, I want to sell it, and I want to make a fee, and then I want to move on to the next one. That's essentially the core of what I'm trying to do. And I'm thinking, where am I going to get my most hits from? Am I going to get most of my hits from putting it in the newspaper and just hoping? I mean, any advertising is sort of fire and forget. You just have to hope that someone sees it and picks up the phone and goes, oh, I've seen a big house, I want to have a look at it. But with online, the thing that you get, the crux of it is, when you do online advertising, it's heavily targeted. So you've got things that, I don't know if listeners are aware of this, but when you go on Google and you put things in Google search, you go on Facebook and you put things in, it sort of records what you're doing. And that's how you get these retargeted ads. So you search for a Michael Kors handbag or something. But I don't know if you do, Roberto. Maybe you don't.
All the time.
But,
No, he searches for stilettos on
Can you not see them over there? It's got them lined up.
Lacoste, there we go. So you search for a Lacoste polo, and then you'll find later, you'll be looking on a different website, and a little advert will come up saying Lacoste polo. So it's heavily targeted.
I've got a really interesting way of buying and selling houses. I will, if I'm not in the process, but if I was buying another house, I would go to my local estate agent, sit down, have a cup of tea, and say, I want to know when something. This is the kind of thing I want, and I want when it comes on the market.
Will you ring me?
Ring me before you put it up.
This is the thing that's really interesting, because
That's how you buy a house.
Because of the way that estate agents work. When you do that, predominantly, I'm not saying all of them, okay, because I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but you'll go in, you'll register. The way that it's set up, and it feeds back into our first discussion about the sort of the chief executives. You'll get your house valued, and the guy at the top will come out and see you. But you can bet your bond quid that when it's actually doing the negotiation and the buying and the selling and the viewings, it's the 17-year-old who's been working there 3 months is the one that's doing all the heavy lifting of actually selling £1 million house. Come on. I mean, they don't have the life experience, and that's not disparaging them. Everyone's got to start somewhere. Everyone has to learn the ropes, but you don't do that. You have to give these people. They're your clients. They're paying you tens of thousands of pounds in fees. Some agents, Foxton's, 2% on a £3-4 million house. I mean, do the maths. That's a lot of money to be paying someone to do viewings, drink coffee all day, or whatever it is. But
you got any vacancies?
Yeah, so that sounds like you should go back into the business.
I don't charge 2%. I hasten to add we're at 1.3.
But hang on. Jonathan's job is pretty fresh. He's got to deliver results for his clients, otherwise they're going to go for him, right?
Yes.
Yours is quite intense, right? Yeah. Yours is a pretty cushy job, to be honest with you.
It sounds cushy.
If you don't mind me saying.
But when the brown stuff hits the rotating thing, that's what you're paying for. It's almost like an insurance policy, because when house sales go wrong, there are certain ways that you can navigate through things. And I mean, I'm trying to think of examples. I mean, what have I had recently? I can't think of an example recently.
I'm going to take some travel headlines and use how you can think about the thing.
I will think about it. I haven't got one. Everything's gone so smoothly because I'm so good at my job.
It sounds rather cushy. You always know when you've got a really good panel like tonight, because the time just absolutely flies by. Karen Frick, Alistair Melville and Jonathan Davis with us tonight. This text says, Rob, has Jonathan read the book by Ha Chun Chang, 23 Things That Don't Tell You About Capitalism? You should read it, apparently.
Oh, well, thanks. I haven't read it. And has your listener also read Hazlitt's Economics in One Chapter? Also, a very good intro into free market capitalism.
Well done. Tony says, well, local papers are only relevant to the local area. People of Luton are not really interested in local news of Bedford, Leighton, Buzzard or Ampthill, and vice versa. Local news has to be local to the town. We like the national and international news. And this says, Robert, if the BBC have to own up about pay of staff, then so should all businesses. And Jonathan, to the free market, I'm with Theresa May on this, surprisingly, says Marion. Right, ever had a PPI payment? I know some of us are sick and tired of hearing adverts and calls asking us to check if we've had PPI, but the end is finally in sight as today marks the start of the 2-year countdown for consumers to make a complaint about payment protection insurance. Now, apparently so far, 12 million people have successfully claimed compensation, but apparently there are still more people entitled to some money back. How big was this scandal, Jonathan?
Not as big as 12 million. The scandal is that there have been millions of people claiming, and because there's no real investigation, they're just getting paid off. Because it costs more to investigate than actually the true compensation. Originally, it was meant to be 1 to 2 million, and by the look of it, it's going to go to 16 million or something like that. But even bigger scandal than that is you think, well, the banks are paying out, but hold on a minute, we, the people, are handing money hand over fist to the banks. It's not the bankers who are paying this compensation, it's the banks themselves. It's us who are giving money to the banks. The shareholders aren't really paying it, the bankers aren't paying it, it's us who are giving out our own money.
So it's not free money then? People who claim PPI compensation is not free money?
Well, it's free money to the people who are receiving it, but it's not free money to the economy in aggregate.
Okay. Karen, ever had a PPI payment?
No, never.
No, not me.
No, me neither.
No.
So who these 12 million people?
I'll bet you, I'd wager you, that if you go to your bank and say, I'm claiming PPI, whether or not you deserve it, they'd pay you a couple of £1,000.
Get out of here.
Well, there's basically no investigation going on. I'd wager that. Let's go.
So I just rack up from my local bank. Well, they're bank boxes that you have to find one. Of course, I'll turn up with some sackcloth and ashes. I'll give me kids. I'll borrow someone else's kids. I'll borrow some kids crying and say, "Oh, I want PPI." No, just give me cash.
The adverts tell us, look, all we need is to know the name of your bank. How much investigation can you do with that?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, just think around after the little Got to try it. You've got to try it. Can we talk about Carling? The alcohol content of Carling, one of the most popular lagers in the UK, is weaker than advertised at most. Now, the story here is that Carling advertises the lager as 4% alcohol by volume, but it's been brewed at 3.7% since 2012. Its US owners, Molson Coors, have said. The ABV was reduced in order to cut tax on Carling products, the firm said during a hearing brought about by the HMRC. There is no suggestion that Molson Coors have broken any laws, apparently. But shouldn't consumers get exactly what it says, literally, on the tin, Alistair?
I think yes. I think my opinion on this is food should be labelled correctly. Food and drink, whatever it is, it should be exactly as it says on the tin. But then there's another half of me that says, well, if it's 3.7, it should be 4, and there's less alcohol, and it's probably better for you. It means you can drink more beer.
No, but they only did it to pay less tax. So the can says 4%. They reduced it to 3.7. So that it didn't tell consumers. Karen, you're shaking your head.
Well, I was going to say, no.
I was going to say that I'd read somewhere that they've got a tolerance, haven't they? That they're allowed to have within 0.5% tolerance or something. I think that's some rule within the yeah. Seems
I was just going to say my partner actually works in the brewing industry, and I personally don't agree with it. I think if it's got 3.7, then that is what it should say. Just like if it says it's got 5 grams of sugar, then it should be 5 grams of sugar. But it's not just to avoid tax, because of course, in order to make the beer, the weaker it is, of course, the less ingredient is required.
Yes.
Therefore, if you are selling in the volumes that these guys are selling in, it is also about making more profit.
Yes.
Because if you are selling, let's give it an example. For example, that we say, okay, well, here's a cup of coffee, so it's going to cost me 10 pence to make this cup of coffee, but if each cup of coffee is a centimetre less, then I'm going to make more money because I can make more coffee. Yeah. And the same applies here.
This has been brushed off, but I put it as something to the VW scandal, Jonathan. Consumers are not getting what they were expecting.
It's funny, I was actually thinking about cars, an analogy which I'll come to. You said pointedly there is no suggestion Molson Coors, who are the, I think, big American owners of Carlsberg, have broken any laws, in which case, Rob, the law's an ass. I mean, here we're saying... their marketing on the can says it's 4%, but it's actually 3.7%. And as you say, they're allowed a 0.5% difference. Well, 0.5% out of about 4% is 12 or 15%. In the car analogy, that's like VW saying you can get 40 miles per gallon, but actually it's only 33. People would be going crazy if this was the case. No, this is outrageous. They should be brought to book. They should change their cans to 3.7.
Okay. Yeah. Staying with the alcohol theme, because I thought it might police all three of you.
Have you brought some?
No, not allowed. Should we start stockpiling French wine? The French Agriculture Ministry has warned that the country's wine production is expected to fall by 18% this year after vines were damaged by a spring frost. The cold snap wrought particular havoc because it followed a prolonged mild period. Winemakers have attempted to use candles, heaters, and even the downdraft from hovering helicopters to try to save their crops, but to no avail. The 18% reduction in French wine this year, should we help them, Jonathan, by stockpiling?
Certainly not. There's more than one country that produces quality wines.
Well, there's only two, France and Italy.
Rubbish. England produces some excellent wines.
No, that's not wine.
Yes, it is wine, and it's very good.
You can't take it seriously.
Yes, I can.
And most of the great wine growers are outside of the EU. I cannot wait till 2, 3, 4 years down the line. We can import more from New Zealand, from South America, from Australia, at probably lower tariffs.
You don't drink that South American stuff, do you?
I certainly do. £3, thank you very much.
It's not £3. A man of your calibre.
When you just want something to go with your fish and chips, £3 is quite fine.
Fair enough.
Alistair, should we start stockpiling? Is there any excuse to start stockpiling French wine?
Depends if you're into it. If you like French wine, go for it. I mean, well, the question I was thinking just when you were talking about that is, I don't know, I don't profess to be an expert on growing wine and grapes, but if you have a frost and therefore, does that make the wine worse? The stuff that survived, is that going to be a better quality, worse quality? Is it going to be more desirable because 2017-18 is going to be
less quality? It's just not as good, and there's less of it.
There's going to be less of it. It's not going to be great wine, so it's really going to hit France. Which I mean, clients of mine have just moved to France, although luckily they're not in the vineyard business. But it's going to be interesting, I think, for the French economy because it's quite, I think, a reasonably large part of their export economy is going to be obviously French wines because they're well known for it, but. Yeah, I think it just depends on your personal taste. If you really like French wines, then grab yourself some 15 and 16 and just avoid 17.
Karen? Well, I think, personally, I wouldn't stockpile French wine. I like, personally, German wine, so there you go.
Sorry, like a Riesling.
You started off with English wine.
Yeah. No, I don't know. You said, excuse me. Yeah, no, you said the only wine that's worth drinking is French and Italian.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, to which I then said, actually, no.
You can't drink that Spanish stuff.
Well, I don't. I drink German.
Germans engineering, that's their thing, right? Cars, technology.
No, I'm sorry. German wine, yeah, I know. Everybody thinks I'm nuts. They will look at me like, really? But I don't care. I really
it's
like
sweeter,
it.
Isn't it? It's
yeah, it is. I like
sweet
wine.
Yeah,
you see,
sweet
I
wine.
don't
That's
like
dessert wine.
So,
almost.
Yeah.
Can I just deviate a little bit? If you go to someone's house for a dinner party, you're invited to dinner, right, Jonathan? You're invited to dinner, right? Would you take a bottle of German or English wine, or do you think, no, I'm going to go somewhere nice? I'm going to take a.
We were invited yesterday. In fact, bank holiday. We took a bottle of cava.
No. Ooh.
But then you see, you say all of this. You're like sort of implying that this is. Can I just point out that a German supermarket by the name of Lidl recently had an offer, I do believe it was last week, of their own Prosecco, which they marked down to something like £3.99, and people were queuing from 5:30 in the morning to buy it. So there you go. You know, so yeah. I mean, so you know, how does that stack up?
I don't understand. I really don't understand this whole thing with Prosecco. I don't. It's too sweet. Yeah, I don't even like champagne.
I don't like champagne.
I'm not a champagne
No,
person.
it's too dry.
Oh
champagne.
no, it's
I don't
refreshing.
Like it.
It- it's a lovely
Typical.
experience, and it's a third of the price of champagne. But it's made in the exact same way. In French, they say la méthode traditionnelle. It's exactly the same. It's just not from Champagne.
Yes, yeah.
See, none of you three have ever invited me to your house. Well, no, I did come to your
You're
house.
welcome. You can have some German wine.
No, I would bring my own French wine or
Fantastic.
Italian wine. Something quality.
Yeah, bring us some from Italy.
Yeah,
Would
yeah.
you go to someone's house? You've been invited. Depending on how much you like them, does that determine how much you spend on the bottle of wine you take?
Yeah. It depends. It depends on the occasion. It depends, I think, on... Yeah, I went to dinner at a friend's house over the bank holiday weekend, and he mentioned about wine, and I actually forgot to pick up the wine and the dessert, so he wasn't very happy about that. But I bought him a little gift to say thank you afterwards anyway. But yeah, I mean, it depends. If it's a more of a grand occasion, then I think I'd spend £10-15 on a bottle of wine.
Also, I mean, when you have people over, how much you like them, isn't that determined by where you shop?
Yeah, but hang on
if
a
you don't
minute.
like them,
No, hang on a
you get
minute.
out.
I tend to have
Waitrose.
No,
I tend to
yeah,
have a
well-
stock. I have a few in the cupboard, and then I'll because I just go by the label. I just go in and go, that looks like a good label. It must be, you know. I'm not an expert.
Exactly, and neither are
I'm an
most
expert in
people.
houses.
And I bet you any money, and it's been shown time and time and time again. You put wine glasses out, you put the wine in it, you don't tell people what it is, and
true,
they will
true.
and they will
Exactly right.
more than often choose the cheaper option. People, unfortunately, it's a bit like the Emperor's New Clothes, like you've just said. Nobody really knows about wine.
Come on.
No, that's not true. They go in, they go, oh, that bottle looks fancy. Oh, that looks really expensive. Look, we'll buy that, because then they'll think, oh, yeah, and you buy it. You've got no idea what it tastes like.
I know a little. I know a small amount. I've been to vineyards in France, and they've sort of shown us
you
round
do
and tasted
know,
it. I know
come
a
on.
little bit, but I'm not. You know, I'm not enough to do the whole. Yeah, I think it's Michael McIntyre who did the sort of opera that you do when you go to a restaurant. And you go, I'll taste the wine. I have no idea what I'm doing. You know,
Exactly.
is it corked? Who
Exactly,
knows?
yeah.
It tastes
What
all
does
right.
that even mean? Yeah.
I can't pretend to be cultured, I'm afraid.
And in fact, there's been actual studies to show that you can put red colouring into white wine.
I'll get it. What is
Seriously, yeah, and get people, and they will tell you, they will drink it and go, oh, this is a lovely red wine.
Oh, behave.
No,
It's
you look it up
delicious.
if you don't believe me. Seriously.
See, there's a friend of mine who works in Hertfordshire, one of those little villages, and we went out for a meal, boys' night out a couple of months ago. I went around to his house, his wife's away, and someone had given him as a present, because he's got quite a good, nice business, gave him a bottle of a special edition brandy, Jonathan, one of these XO. I think it was a couple £100 a bottle.
Wow.
It was in a big wooden case. It was really quite something. Do you want a drink? Now, I'm not going to say no to cognac. And the thing was, he poured quite a generous glass. It's very hundreds of pounds. And I have to tell you, you can taste the difference.
Silky.
It was smooth. Put the bottle away very quickly. But
that's a different.
Wow.
That's a spirit, not a wine. That's a different. That's not comparing like with like.
Taste the quality.
What is interesting is we're just back from southwest France, our summer holiday, and we were invited there to friends there. And our thought process was, well, these guys are French. They'll want a better bottle than our British friends. So we actually spent more in France than we...
Told you. It all depends on how much you like the people.
To be fair.
Just told you. Let's take some trophies, come back. I told you these three would be good. It's 13 minutes to 7. Tonight's panel: Jonathan Davis, Alasdair Melville, and Karen Frick. I'll give you details of where you can contact them if you so choose to very shortly. I just realised that, given that I was writing most of this stuff yesterday afternoon in the garden with the sun shining, most of the topics centre around alcohol. I do apologise. It's £13.40 for a pint of beer. Too much. A London pub has hit back after being criticised for charging customers £13.40 for one pint. The Rake in Borough, the very trendy Borough Market, has denied claims from furious beer lovers that it was gouging our customers over the price of its Cloudwater Northwest Double IPA. The landlord insisted customers are not being ripped off, saying that at 9% strength it was never going to be cheap. £13.40 for a pint of beer, Alison. Is that a bit too much?
Yes. Well, I think I had in my head, maybe this is uncharitable, but I had in my head, if you're going to go into a pub in Borough Market, then you're going to expect to pay a little bit more than you would maybe if you went into a pub in a village outside Tring. But £13.40. But why would you? But if someone said to me, if I said, "Oh, how much is that?" But then you don't do that, do you? You go into the pub and you go, "I'll have a pint." You sort of think it's roughly there's a kind of an accepted level. It's an unspoken rule, isn't it? Yeah, something like that. £4. I don't know. It's been a while since I bought one, but you sort of there's almost an unwritten rule, isn't there? I'll have a pint of your finest bitter, please, landlord. And then you think £13.40. You think, where are the other three? Or are the other 2 pints?
Karen, imagine you've gone in, you're with a group of friends, you're buying a round, you've had 3 pints of this lager and a glass of white wine, and the bill will be...
I'd have to drink the 3 pints and the white wine before I'd pay them the £13.42 or whatever it is. Yeah. I'm afraid I would never pay that. Never.
That's so much.
No, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. I mean, but you don't. At the end of the day, you don't have to buy it. You don't have to. You can say no.
But the other thing is, if you sit down for a meal, you know roughly what the meal's going to cost you. You look at the menu, but you don't go to a pub saying, "Excuse me, barman or barman."
Well, no, if someone brought me a pint, and I would buy a pint. But if someone stuck a pint in front of me and said that's for you, I say, "Well, I don't want it, thanks," and walk out.
Yeah.
End of.
Have you ever been into it? You know, when you go into a pub, you go into a village pub, they do have to display a price list. I think that's the law. But it's always in the tiny little picture frame, somewhere right at the end of the bar. And if you get
to be £3 or £4, I mean,
yeah. But you don't mind. I mean, there's some lovely pubs and restaurants around Bedford. Really, really lovely, and you don't mind because you are paying. That's understandable. You go somewhere nice. You're paying for the ambience, as it were. And that's absolutely fine. Nobody minds that. That you expect that. That's absolutely cool. But I can't understand because if he's saying that it's this expensive because it's what's the percentage?
9%.
9%. So does that mean if it's how much is he asking them for a carling?
Yes. What's his prices for
because
carling?
Surely then surely it'd be half then. You know what I mean? So I mean it'd be interesting to know what the other drink prices are.
I've got friends who live in Leicestershire and further afield, Derbyshire, Chesterfield, and occasionally they'll come down to London on a day trip, but they want to go meet out for a drink, and I always say to them, "We're going to Wetherspoons," and they go, "Why?" I'm thinking, if you know London prices, we're going to. If you want to go somewhere else,
can I actually say Wetherspoons is really good?
Well, it's a business, very successful business.
It's very, very successful, and there's a reason for that. And I'm sure if you went to Wetherspoons, you could probably buy, if not necessarily that particular, but something very similar, and they wouldn't be charging you.
£13.40.
No, exactly.
Jonathan, what would you say if you went in and said, "Barman, a pint of this Cloudwater Northwest Double IPA, please," and then they said, "Thank you, Mr. Davis, it's £13.40.
Is this after I got consciousness back?
Maybe that's the trick. Maybe they only sell it to intoxicated customers.
You've got to have had 3 pints before you can...
Of course, there's it's to do with ability to pay and market ability.
Yes.
But I have to assume that within this story, it's a particularly specialist beer, low volume. See what I did there? High margin, and it's a special event to buy this beer. But if they're charging this as a rule, £10, £12, £14 for a pint normally, well, it's not a pub I'll be going to, that's for sure.
A story we looked at earlier on, and I know Karen was interested in this. Households need to earn £22,000 a year just to cover the bills for an average 3-bedroom family home in the 3 counties. The bills on average have reached £1,516.43 a month, according to new research. Jonathan, does that sound reasonable? Does that figure sound about right?
It definitely sounds about right, I'm afraid to say.
It's quite a lot of money, isn't it?
The cost of living is ridiculous. Although the statisticians say that CPI, consumer price inflation, is about 3% per annum, and by the way, just a year or two ago, we used to have a thing called the retail price index, which they still calculate. That was the CPI, and RPI today is 4% per annum. Wages are going up to 2.5% per annum, and that's just a short term. Over the long term, this is what's dreadful and terrifying. The bottom 60% of earners have not seen above inflation wage rises for nearly 20 years. The bottom 60%.
Because we started talking about fat cat pay. If you're going to resolve that glaring gap between the haves and have-nots, Karen, the declaring what the top earners earn doesn't help. Does this figure sound about right to you? £1,500 a month?
I'll be honest with you, I actually thought it was going to be higher.
Oh, you're talking about the average three-bedroom house?
Because, I mean, if you think about, if you've got your mortgage, you've got your electricity, and as already been pointed out, everything is going up. And especially just recently, I mean, the cost of food has risen. I mean, it might only be, I know this isn't, necessary, but for example, I buy a specific type of diet lemonade and it was 60p. It's gone up to 66p. Now, that's not a lot, it's only 6p, but as a percentage, that's quite high. Yeah. And if you put that across everything, it is going up and we don't see it. The cost of petrol goes up. If you've got two cars, the cost of insurance goes up. It just goes on and on and on. And people's wages, as has already been said, are not in line with the prices that we have to pay, especially for, what we class in the Western world as a necessity, as in electricity, gas, water, and all of that kind of thing.
I've had this conversation. I've tried to have this conversation. People think I'm mad over the last recent months. Because maybe it's the Brexit effect, the pound against the euro. We won't go into that whole political debate. But a loaf of bread is still roughly the same as £1, £5p, whatever. You pay maybe more if you want one. The seeded batch, 4 pints of milk is £1. The basics are more or less. But the other bits and pieces, tea, coffee, all the bits you would have to have, they've all gone up by 20-30%.
Yeah, it might only be incremental, but it is a rise nonetheless. And actually, in response to the thing, for example, with bread, is actually the price might have stayed the same, but the amount you get has got smaller. If you take, for example, a Mars bar, that I remember back in the day, a long time ago, it was huge. Now, not so huge, but you're paying more for it.
There's a technical term for this. It's called shrinkflation. The price more or less stays the same or rises, but the amount you get has been falling for years, in fact, and people are only starting to wake up to this. And the Bank of England, they say, oh, it's outrageous that we've got inflation. And the funniest thing is the Bank of England staff have gone on strike because of inflation. Excuse me, the Bank of England are largely the culprits in creating the inflation.
Okay. Alistair, the average household in the three-bedroom house, average house, needs to earn £22,000 a year just to keep the bills supported. Is that about right to you?
Yeah. I mean, what I've looked at in my research is that there's a thing that I look at a lot, which is the average earnings you need in order to be able to secure a purchase. So how much do you need to have as a household income in order to be able to get approved for a mortgage and then be able to afford to buy a house in this area? You look at areas like, for example, I've just had on the market in Harpenden a 2-bed, 60s, 70s built flat, and it was nearly £500,000 for a 2-bed flat. I sold one in Harpenden, 720,000. Now that was a newer build, but that's a 2-bed flat. And you start thinking, okay, well, a 2-bed flat, who would you imagine to live in a 2-bed flat? If it just popped into your head, it's maybe a young family, maybe a couple, maybe someone on their own, or maybe someone elderly who's downsized. But the amount of money that you have to have, 10% deposit, I mean, who in their, say, early 20s, when you first set out, to go and to buy somewhere, what early 20-year-old couples have got 70 grand, 80 grand, 100 grand lying around?
And then the ongoing cost of supporting that property.
Yeah, that's it. And the thing I was going to say about this particular point is the household bills thing. It's a really interesting point for me in property. Now, I don't know if anyone knows about EPCs, that you have to have an EPC if you sell a house.
The energy rating.
Yeah. So if you've seen it, you go and buy a fridge or something, it's got the little bar graph with the different colours on it, and it's got the A, B, C, D, E. We have to have those for houses. So you have to have a domestic energy assessor who comes in, assesses how energy efficient your home is, and then on that they can work out what your household bills will be. Now they're bringing in legislation to say that if your EPC rating is below an E and you're a landlord, as of I think next year, you're not allowed to rent your property out. You have to make improvements. Double glazing, insulation, you've got to improve it so your household bills go down. And people, when they're buying houses, I've only ever had it once in my career. I've been doing this for 10 years, 11 years now. I've had one person come to me once and say, oh, the EPC rating's a bit low, I don't think I'm going to buy this one. And he used it as leverage to get the price down. No one else has ever mentioned it. They just go, well, don't need to know that.
I knew it'd be a quick out. Jonathan, where can people get hold of more about you, find out more about you if they want to?
On Twitter, Jonathan Davis, where the O is a 0.
Thank you. Karen?
Again on Twitter at GetIntoBed, or on our website at getintobed.org, or on Facebook.
And finally, Alistair.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Hawk and Chadwick, or at Alistair Agency is my own personal one. Or you can go to www.hawkandchadwick.co.uk.
Panel, thank you. You have set the bar very high this week, panel. The other panellists will have to go some way to better you three.